Growth of cities. In the 14th century, cities in what is now Germany experienced a real boom. Centers like Nuremberg and Cologne became important hubs of trade and craftsmanship. This was largely due to the development of trade routes connecting Western and Eastern Europe. Peasants, artisans, and merchants flocked to cities, hoping to find work and improve their lives. Urban life offered more freedom compared to rural areas. Serfdom weakened and sometimes disappeared entirely. There was even a saying, if a person lived in a city for a year and a day, they became free. However, city life was far from easy. Competition among craftsmen was intense, housing was cramped, and living conditions were often unsanitary. Cities were also fortified with walls and towers, making them relatively safe. Inside these walls, a new culture developed. Markets, town halls, and churches became the center of public life. This environment gave rise to an early form of the bourgeoisie, the beginnings of Europe's future middle class. The Black Death. The pandemic known as the Black Death was one of the most devastating events in European history. It reached German lands around 1348 and within a few years wiped out a huge portion of the population. Estimates range from 30% to 50%. People did not understand the nature of the disease, so they explained it as God's punishment, bad air, or even conspiracies. This led to panic, religious processions, and sadly, persecution of minorities. Many Jewish communities were attacked after being falsely blamed for spreading the disease. However, the consequences of the plague were not only tragic, but also socially transformative. With fewer workers available, peasants and craftsmen became more valuable. They could demand better wages, conditions, and sometimes even freedom. Landowners were forced to make concessions. In this way, the plague helped reshape society. Old feudal structures began to weaken, paving the way for more modern economic and social systems. 3. The Holy Roman Empire. Germany in the 14th century was part of the Holy Roman Empire, but it was not a unified state in the modern sense. Instead, it was a complex patchwork of hundreds of territories, duchies, principalities, free cities, and church lands. Each of these regions had significant autonomy. Local rulers collected taxes, administered justice, and governed their lands independently. The emperor had limited authority and often depended on powerful princes. This fragmentation meant that everyday life could vary greatly from one region to another. Laws, customs, and even systems of measurement could differ between neighboring areas. While this made trade more complicated, it also encouraged cultural diversity. Despite its complexity, the empire played an important role in European politics, participating in wars, alliances, and religious affairs for centuries. 4. Election of the Emperor. Unlike many monarchies, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was not automatically a hereditary ruler. Instead, he was elected by a group of powerful princes known as electors. One of the most notable rulers of this time was Charles IV. The election process was formalized in a document called the Golden Bull of 1356, which clearly defined who could vote and how the election should take place. This helped stabilize the political system. However, elections also meant constant political maneuvering. Candidates had to win the support of the electors, often by promising privileges or concessions. This weakened central authority, but strengthened regional rulers. Even so, the emperor held symbolic importance as the head of the empire and defender of Christianity. In practice, though, his power depended heavily on alliances and personal influence. 5. Guilds. Guilds were a central part of urban economic life in the 14th century. These were associations of craftsmen in the same trade: blacksmiths, weavers, bakers, and others. They strictly regulated production, pricing, and quality. Becoming a master required years of training. A person started as an apprentice, then became a journeyman, and only after producing a masterpiece could they earn the title of master. Guilds protected their members from outside competition and provided social support, such as helping widows and orphans. However, they also limited freedom. You couldn't simply start a business outside the guild system. Guilds often had political influence as well, sometimes participating in city governance. This made them an important part of both the economic and social structure of medieval towns. 6. Living conditions. Life in 14th century cities was far from comfortable. Streets were narrow and often filthy. Waste was commonly thrown out of windows, and proper sewage systems were almost non-existent. This created unhealthy conditions and contributed to the spread of disease. Houses were usually made of wood and built very close together. Fires were frequent and could destroy entire neighborhoods. Families often lived in cramped spaces, sometimes with multiple generations under one roof. Water supplies were often contaminated, making them unsafe to drink. As a result, people frequently drank beer or wine instead, even children. Despite these hardships, cities remained vibrant centers of life, with markets, festivals, and religious events. People adapted and built their lives within these challenging conditions. 7. Castles. In the 14th century, castles were not just symbols of power, but also essential defensive structures. They were built on hills or strategic locations to control land and protect against enemies. Feudal lords lived in castles with their families and servants. Contrary to popular belief, these were not luxurious palaces, but rather cold, damp, and practical buildings. Castles also served as administrative centers. Taxes were collected, legal matters were handled, and decisions affecting the surrounding population were made there. In times of danger, peasants could seek refuge within castle walls. This made castles a key part of the local defense system. Over time, they became symbols of status, but in the 14th century, their main role was still protection and control. 8. Religion. Religion played a central role in everyday life during the 14th century. The church influenced not only spiritual matters, but also social and political life. People regularly attended services, observed fasts, and celebrated religious holidays. The church also controlled education, as most schools were connected to monasteries. It played a major role in law and moral guidance. Many people deeply believed in God and feared punishment for sins. This shaped their behavior and decisions, for example, donating money to the church to secure salvation. Religious beliefs were also used to explain events like disease or natural disasters. This made the church an important source of comfort and meaning. At the same time, early signs of criticism toward church authority were beginning to emerge, laying groundwork for future changes like the Reformation. 9. The Hanseatic League. The Hanseatic League was a powerful network of trading cities, many of them German. It dominated trade across Northern Europe, especially around the Baltic and North Seas. The League helped protect trade routes and defend merchants' interests. This encouraged international trade and increased the wealth of member cities. Members of the League enjoyed privileges in foreign markets, such as reduced taxes and fewer restrictions, giving them a competitive edge. The Hanseatic League also had political influence. It negotiated treaties and even engaged in wars to protect its interests. Overall, it played a crucial role in the economic development of the region and the rise of powerful urban centers. Religious beliefs were also used to explain events like disease or natural disasters. This made the church an important source of comfort and meaning. At the same time, early signs of criticism toward church authority were beginning to emerge, laying groundwork for future changes like the Reformation. 10. Witches and fear. In the 14th century, fear of witches already existed, although large-scale witch hunts would come later. People believed in magic, demons, and supernatural forces. Unexplained events, such as illness, crop failure, or sudden death, were often blamed on witchcraft. This created an atmosphere of suspicion and fear. Accusations frequently targeted women, especially those who were isolated or different from others. In some cases, this led to trials and punishments. The church played a role in shaping these beliefs, condemning magic as heresy and a threat to Christian society. Although not yet widespread, These early fears laid the foundation for the large-scale witch hunts that would occur in later centuries.